being human isn't soft. Being human isn't a weakness. Actually, being human drives performance, and human workplaces outperform.
Our world has shifted, and especially these last 5 years, and it's going to continue with AI.
You're going to worry when you have to worry about that thing anyway, so why worry now?
Welcome back to I Can Fit That In, the show where ambition meets alignment. Today, I am joined by Dr. Gian Power, founder and CEO of TLC Lions. Gian's work is rooted in a deeply personal turning point, an unthinkable tragedy in 2015 that reshaped how he sees leadership, connection, and what it actually means to truly support people at work. Since then, Gian has been on a mission to humanize the workplace, partnering with over 300 global organizations, including Google, Amazon, and Rolls-Royce, and reaching millions around the world through his work. He was recently awarded an OBE for his contributions to mental health. Gian brings a powerful perspective on how we lead, how we show up for one another, the stories we tell, and what it really means to create environments where people can thrive. Gian, welcome to the show. It's so good to see you.
Hello, Erin. No, thank you for having me. It's great to be with you today.
Yeah, you're so welcome. I have been really excited to host you on the show because obviously you and Craig and I have been able to connect before this, and I'm obviously very drawn to your work. Your work is, like mine, about making the world a better place and doing so in corporate, right? In business. This is the cloth that we're both cut from. You spent a lot of time in corporate, as I did, and you were at Deutsche, PwC. I was at Goldman, CBRE. So we know big business, right? The really interesting thing about you and what I would love to start with is that your work, yes, it is centered around helping people feel seen and feel supported and to really humanize what it means to be a leader and to be at work. But what you also have done is that you've really used this personal experience to tell your story and to impact the world rather than just theory or something that you learned, through school or through some sort of a degree. So what I would love to start with, if okay with you, is can you take us back to 2015 when tragedy did strike for you and how that has really shifted your life?
Of course. And firstly, thank you for the kind words and echoed back at you the incredible work that you do. And let's go back a little bit then. Yeah. Let's go back to April 2015. I'd graduated from university. I'd been at Deutsche Bank. I'd started at PwC. I was in financial restructuring. I was at the start of my career and I was super excited. Life was fantastic. But then one day in May, it suddenly wasn't. And I guess the long and short of this is I grew up in a very, very loving family, very close to my mum and my dad. My dad, an entrepreneur, always instilled a lot of lessons in me. We're on the phone every single day. And one day when we're on the phone, he told me he had to take a flight to India. We spoke from the airport and my dad flew. In short, I never saw my father again after that phone call. And my dad went missing in India for 3 weeks before we discovered that somebody admitted to murdering him. And life changed so much. And back then I was 23 years old. And yeah, it's been a journey. I took 3 months out of work back then, who were very supportive. But when I went back, Erin, I guess I started to notice something. And whilst everything continued in my personal life, and 10 years on today, I still lead and fight the murder case. It's still ongoing for justice. But back then, I went back to work and I noticed there were almost two types of leader around me. There were these lovely leaders, caring, compassionate. They were there. They were great listeners. I like to call them the human leader. But then there was those, as Harvard Business Review calls them, the toxic rock stars. They might be good for business in the short term, but they're terrible for culture. And like with all of our lives, you, me, anyone listening, these moments make you wake up and shake up and think, who's around me? Who do I want to be like? How do I want to spend my days? I thought those human leaders are powerful because they are both human and effective. And I thought, imagine if we could share this with the world, that being human isn't soft. Being human isn't a weakness. Actually, being human drives performance and human workplaces outperform. And that's where we got to. So it was a bit of a shift in life. And on a personal note, I think we all go through things and they make us into who we are. And I've learned a lot through that time as well.
Yes. Well, thank you for sharing that. I know it's deeply personal, but you do talk about it publicly because it is a part of your power source, right? Like it is a part of, first of all, what makes you you, and it's a part of your story and a very important aspect of that. But you're also using it to really help others, right? So we take these tragedies and these things that happen to us. And I know we connected, and I write this in my book in the introduction about my father dying when I was a sophomore in college, right? And getting that phone call and having talked to him the night before and then getting the call the next day that, he's dead, right? And it's just like those things are, first of all, yeah, they're tragic when you go through them and traumatic experiences. And obviously yours is very different than mine. But at the same time, I remember professors at university marking me off the roll call list for the rest of the semester. And so when I got back to school after a week of, taking some time away to, to not to mourn, we do that forever, but to be at the funeral, what have you, I would go to these professors after class and say, why am I marked out for the rest of the semester? And they're like, oh, well, we heard what happened. We figured you wouldn't come back. And I'm like, I'm back with a vengeance. Like now I'm really back. Right. So I love your story and how much, I have so much respect for you sharing that with us. I have a big question for you when it comes to these two types of leaders, because in my experience in corporate America, I unfortunately and fortunately did not notice a lot of the good leaders. I noticed so many really toxic ones. And there were the few and far between who were more of these human leaders, right? And I always say leadership starts with being human. And if you lead from that place, it is so different how you, first of all, impact others, but also how effective you are, not just in the short term, but in the long term. So how did you define success when it came to leadership before this experience that you had? Because you definitely started to notice things differently afterwards. So how did that change for you?
Yeah, it's a great question. And I think pre 2015, like I've always been, probably like yourself, very driven, very self motivated, incredibly competitive. But I've also deeply cared about people. In fact, I feel like I've been fascinated by people from a young age. You go on the street, I look on the beach, I just see families talking. I've always thought like everybody has a story, but I think it was more passive and it hadn't come to the forefront of my mind. And so to answer your question about leadership, I guess it was more, work very hard, get my head down. Things were based on merit. I always thought leaders are not mind readers. So you have to be able to be vocal and share what's on your mind. I guess I was very much for high performance culture. And that, again, doesn't mean anything bad. It was just more work was work. I've always been like this. I'm not saying I'm right or wrong. Like work is work and then fun is fun. I've always just been kind of this tale of two halves. When this happened, I guess I was thrown into the arms almost of leaders, because imagine having a boss as I did, three in particular, who just had an employee whose dad missing and then murdered. Like, what on earth do? You just have to be a good human. And I guess I witnessed it firsthand. And I will never forget a lady called Isabel Gross. She's a partner at PwC. I had a lot going on in the ongoing murder case and court battles that went on for years. And I'd be doing my exams, the CPA exams, and I'd get emails from solicitors. She cared so much that whilst I was working, she'd say, whenever you get an email, forward it to me. So I forwarded it to her. She would look at it and say, no, don't need to read it. Or, okay, let's read that together. Or leave that for 1 week, leave that for 3 weeks. And her doing that just took it all off me. And she is a very high performing leader. She's one of the most admired at PwC here in the UK. And she showed me that you can do both. In fact, not just do both, we should. And that the most human leaders were the jobs that people wanted to work for and work with, and the outcomes were tremendous.
Right. It's so true. I mean, the more human the leader is, and again, that's not soft. What that is actually strength. And the more that they allow people to be people, right? And sort of give themselves permission first, and then allow that to be the influence and the impact on other people that work for them and work with them. It's not only what our modern world is and needs, but it's what works. It works so much, and people don't get that sometimes. They think it's about authority. And I'm curious from your perspective. I mean, you work around, the globe, right? So you see a lot of different, cultural impacts in business. And what do you see I guess two questions, like what works and what do you see as a struggle in some of these different parts of the world that you work with when it comes to the way that leaders maybe want to show up, but what they're pressured to show up as?
It's a great one. And, I smile because today there's delivery going on in Newport Beach, California, in Seoul in South Korea, and in New Zealand, and in Scotland, actually. And they are completely different parts of the world, but the companies are also very different culturally too. So we have to be just very, very mindful of where are they on the journey. Now, the way that we approach that is, I guess, firstly, we just do a lot of listening with the organization. But what we've done is over the years, we've tried to understand, well, what really does make a human leader? And then I'm going to come back to that global point. And we actually broke it down into 5 points that spell out human. Shock. Because we realized that wherever we go in the world, these are applicable. Because if they weren't applicable, it wouldn't work. And we found that a human leader, whether in Japan or in California, firstly, they could harness themselves, i.e. they were self-aware, they understood themselves. The next one is they would uplift others. Those in their team, those around them, their clients, they uplifted them. Then the M was that they could mobilize a team. They knew how to get down to business and mobilize the team. Then they could accelerate the business forward and they could navigate change. And so we found that although it might be slightly different how they mobilize a team in Japan versus in New York, the crux of it were all there. And so now it's just, it's fascinating. And obviously the lions around the world, they have that subject matter expertise. We know that to build trust in Japan is one of, that it's knowledge, it's wisdom. There's a quietness and understanding and respect versus work we might do in the UK and the US. So globally, a lot of listening, a lot of reading, a lot of learning, and we get things wrong sometimes. Try not to.
Yeah. I mean, that's the part of, sometimes you do have to obviously fail at things to learn and grow, right? And to know what's going to work better next time. So in this work, you talk a lot about humanizing the workplace. And I'm curious what you think that most leaders are still getting wrong about what people actually need at work today, right? Because our world has shifted, and especially these last 5 years, and it's going to continue with AI. But what are people getting wrong? And then we'll go into, all the things that they can get right.
If we were speaking 2 years ago, 5 years ago, and maybe 2 years in the future, I feel like all of these answers would change. And there's a big one that's on my mind at the moment. And I'm not saying I have the answer, and I don't want to sound controversial because it's not my style, but you go back to 5 years ago, COVID, we saw into each other's living rooms. And I was just on actually with wonderful leader, Kirsty Graham. She's the CEO at Edelman at USA. They do the trust barometer, the trust index. Fantastic leader. And she was just saying this to me, COVID, we saw into homes, we showed vulnerability. It built trust. It was this feeling that employees didn't know that they needed, but we kind of got it and we bonded and gelled with our leaders. Now I fast track to 2026. This is what I'm hearing, by the way. I'm not saying my opinion. People say, be you. But be the best you, the real you, the authentic you, but not the needy you. Again, I'm just putting that what I'm hearing. And so I've had this conundrum over the last few weeks, and I've put it to a lot of leaders. Be the best you, but don't be the needy you. That's what I'm hearing now in workplaces, that leaders say, workplace is a source of we look after you and care for you. There's a duty of care. But there's certain things that we don't always need here. That is very hard to communicate. Now, some companies I feel went so far in letting, again, don't quote me on this, the whole self, but maybe too much, because we've all got that. I've got my needy side as well that my wife might see in my family, but everybody needs to see it at work. Did we allow that in and now we don't want it? I don't think I'm answering your question clearly, which is what are we getting wrong? But I certainly feel like this pendulum has been swinging and now companies are struggling to know where it lands. And it's not easy.
Gian, what comes up for me in hearing you say this? I've seen that evolution as well, right? And it's I was talking about authenticity before anyone even really knew what that meant, right? It was not something that people were really talking about in corporate America. And because of my own transformative journey with that and understanding that, I'm not going to act like somebody anymore. I'm just going to be myself. And when I do that, I actually attract and magnetize more to me that I want, because now there's no facade, right? And it doesn't mean, oh, like I had a client, a leader within a leadership development framework I was doing for a corporation several years ago. This guy who was kind of on his way out, about to ride off into the sunset in retirement. He said, "Oh, so if I just show up as a jerk, that's being authentic, right? Because I'm a jerk." And I'm like, "No, it's not. Like, there's this thing called ego that you're identifying with, and that's a different story, right?" So I was like, "We'll take that offline." But what I see a lot of now is that, yes, there is this like, okay, be yourself, be authentic, be whole, right? But the way that I go about this with people is, it is not your company, your employer's responsibility to make you into that person. It is not their responsibility to give you everything you need to be happy. Like, that's an inside job. And I mean, this is like a big part of my keynote talks, right? Because I think gone are the days that we put the pressure on the employer to make these perfect environments. Nothing's perfect, right? And when you have so many humans, it's like being a retailer. When you have so many people buying your product, you can't make everybody happy, because we're humans. It's what makes the world go round. So I find it really intriguing that you're seeing this, and also this, like, okay, bring yourself, but don't bring your needs. Like, we will give you all the things to do your work, which is okay, right? But you've got to meet your own needs, or find the people in your personal life that help you meet those. Would you say, or I guess, how would you say that empathy comes into this? Because I imagine a lot of the work that you do is around empathy and being empathetic leaders. So how much does that maybe impact how this shows up in the work that you're doing?
Look, I think it's so important. I go back to that human side. The H and the U, like to harness self and uplift others, it absolutely requires the skill of empathy to know oneself, to know somebody else, to really step into their world. And I think it's so important. But I take it a step further. I think empathy is key to, to understand a client. I mean, I love storytelling. What you have to do is, I say to people in every situation, what's the situation you're in? What's the outcome that you want? And how do you tailor your reaction or your response to get that outcome? You can only do that if you can fully empathize with the situation, or who is in front of you, or how am I going to influence them? There's a fine line between storytelling and manipulation. I'll just put that there. And so I think empathy is an absolute skill. I just think, look, the way that we brand these words as the world of work flows down the river, and it will continue to, I think that just changes. When we do our work in the Middle East, we did a breakfast in Dubai recently. You go around, what's your word for 2026? Now, if we did this in, let's say, London, New York, you'll see a blend. It might be intention or whatever it's going to be. Grace. There it was a lot around expansion. Growth. These are the words coming out. Nothing wrong with that. And so when we talk about empathy over there, I almost liken it, I talk about trust. I know they're different, but it's the importance of building trust, the importance of relationship building. So I just think the way in which we talk about these words has to change. And we've evolved for the last 7 years, every year or two. Even now I'm evolving it over the next, we've got to massage it slowly to where the world is going. Otherwise we're behind.
Right. So true. I would love to know, we've talked so much about your business, TLC Lions, and what you see out there as you're doing this incredible work that you're doing globally. We talked about leadership and where that's going and where it's been and how it's changed. And I'm curious for you personally, you talked a little bit about family. How do you stay connected to yourself, right? How do you stay grounded with all the responsibility of running a business that is international? And also, I mean, you're traveling quite a bit. So what are your sort of core rituals that really keep you connected and grounded?
Love it. I really truly believe, and obviously this is scientifically proven, that we have to go between the recovery zone and the performance zone. And I think I learned that quite fast after what happened with my dad. And I thought, and I'm going to get personal for a second, but if I'm going to lead this murder case, look after my mum, look after my sister, look after everyone, and get my exams done, and look after my career, I started Googling this stuff and I was like, oh yeah, that's stress. I need to manage that thing called stress. How do you do it? You look after things like hydration, your diet, your exercise, your sleep. And so I started putting it in place, but I kind of not obsessed about it in a bad way. I believe in discipline over motivation. And I started to discipline myself to do it. I change things. Some things stick, some things don't. Meditation. I have to work out 5 times a week. I have to have Gian's time. I have to go for walks. Like all of this stuff, like my non-negotiables are working out in the morning. I'm up early. And I know my triggers. A good friend of me told me, don't worry twice. And it always stayed with me. He's like, you're going to worry when you have to worry about that thing anyway. So why worry now? Now, I'm not speaking about, some people who have medical conditions and mental health challenges. I'm just talking about me day to day here. So things like that. And I'm around great people. I will only be around to talk about uplift others. I am so sensitive, and I think you are as well, to negative energy. If I sense it, I'm like, get away from me. If I'm in a restaurant, Erin, and I'm working, I'm like, ooh, I sense it. Like, I can't do my best work here. And I'm
oh my gosh.
I can control that now. I couldn't before.
Yeah. Or when you feel obligated to be around people, maybe because like they're in your much or something, and it's like you spend 5 days with them and then you're a different person because of how much you absorbed. Yeah. Like that is very real. We have a sixth sense as humans. Like it's very real. I'm so glad you brought that up. Yeah.
Yeah. I was around, not a lot of them at PwC because it's a lovely firm and I'm close to them, but energy vampires, mood hoovers, whatever you want to call them, they suck it out of you when you go in. And I just say to people, if they're listening, to like, Gian, that's easy for you to say, you're not around these people. But even if you are, just being aware of who they are and minimizing your time with them, or put the guard up. So I say, I can see you, I can hear you, but your emotions are not coming through to me.
Right. Like put like an invisible shield, essentially. Right.
Literally. I do it a lot.
I used to do that in the corporate office I was in as well. I mean, and I actually physically would sit in a different spot. In a lot of offices, again, for people like who are listening that are in an office every day, they have these common spaces and you can take your laptop and you can go sit there. When you feel that energy is getting tense or heavy, sit in a different spot, until your next meeting. So there are definitely ways around that. So thanks for bringing that up. I'm also curious what you would say for people listening who are leaders and want to really be more present or bring more of that human side out in their leadership. What is just one shift that they could start making immediately to do that?
Look, one thing I'd say, and a therapist told me this, she said, Gian, you can sometimes go 0 to 100 super quick, like activated. She's like, challenge yourself to go 100 back to 0, just that little bit quicker whenever that happens. And it stayed with me. Whether something happens that I disagree with or something happens that just, it's triggered, it's kind of really grinded my gears for some reason, I'll just stop, just sit with it. I know the classic saying goes, don't act when activated, be responsible, all of that stuff. But now I just do it. And so I'd say people, 1, try and do that. And number 2, I know this is good old, but this goes back thousands of years. Meditation. I tell you, if it's driven such self-awareness at PwC, I used to, and I know this is weird, but whatever. If I was having a tough day, not really work stuff, but just like life on top of it, I'd go into the bathrooms, shut the cubicle door, put the toilet seat down, and I'd just sit and I'd just breathe. 2 minutes later, I'm like a new man. And so nobody can tell me they don't have 120 seconds in a day, because as Gandhi said, the days when I'm twice as busy, I'll meditate twice as long. Take from that what you will.
Yes, that's so true. And how many people may start a meditation practice, but then they're like, okay, yeah, I feel good now, so I don't need that anymore. It's like, no, like this is just, it's a daily way of being, and it only, you can do it 2 minutes or 25. It doesn't matter. Right. But it's just in any moment, when it's something that's going to anchor you and you do feel different. So such a great one. Last thing, Gian, I would love to have you share sort of what I would call one truth or one thing you'd like people to know about intention or alignment or performance in this modern world when it comes to the way you live and lead your own life, or as it pertains to the work that you do in the world.
Big question.
Mm-hmm.
Look, I don't want to preach here and say I'm perfect, because I'm far from perfect and I'm learning every day. I just want to share that. But I did make a change a few years ago, and that was my mornings. I fiercely protect my mornings. I do wake up early. I do go to bed early. I will leave dinners early if I have to. People know that about me. If I'm having dinner, it's 6 o'clock dinner. Don't be putting anything else in. And so my message there is, I guess I'm trying to say, try and own your mornings a little bit. As Robin Sharma once said, I read his book. the 5 a.m. club. I'm not saying you have to get up at 5 a.m., but there's so much power and richness in the morning before people are awake that I sit and I think, or I sit and I work out, or I just sit and be, or whatever it is. The quietness of a morning is when my best thoughts come. And that's honestly been a game changer for the last 6 years for me. I put it down to that.
That's beautiful. And it's so true. I mean, if you wake up and start rushing into your day, and especially if you have children in your home and other people in general, everything just takes from you, and it will. And those demands will always be there. And so where do you protect that space and time for you with you? Right.
This is it. And I will say this, Erin, if I can, because I live in this weird situation where I'm like, I'm two extremes, but I wrote it down the other day on my Instagram, and I was like, you can be both driven and grateful. You can have absolute ambition and presence. They're not mutually exclusive. And I remind myself every day that you can race around the city as I do at 100 miles an hour. I'm like, isn't the sky so bloody lovely today? It's so blue. I'm just looking out. And just don't miss that stuff, because life is just gone before you know it. And it's so precious.
That is so true. It's not either or. It's both and. Yes. Yes. Yeah. That's awesome. Well, Gian, where can people find you and connect with you?
Yeah, sure. So people can find me on LinkedIn, Instagram. I'm at Gian Power, Gian Power, not Gian, not Guan, Gian, but Gian Power. And
awesome.
To help how I can.
Yes. And we will include links on his work, his website, and his social media in the show notes. And Gian, thank you so much for being here. It was such a pleasure to interview you.
No, thank you for having me, and love the work that you do. Thank you, Erin.
You're so welcome. Everyone, you know what to do. Please like, share, subscribe, and let's get this show out to more and more people who will not only learn from it, but will really resonate with all the teachings of our amazing guests. Thank you so much. Until next time.